Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now with me, your host, Lisa Kipps-Brown. Tonight, I have the guest, Larry Jorgensen, who is the author of, I always get mixed up, the Coca-Cola Trail. And it's a two volume books, people and places in the history of Coca-Cola. These books are fascinating. Brought back so many memories for me, but of course the books start in the 1800s. So that was a little bit before I was born, Larry. But take a minute to introduce yourself to the audience and let us know your background and then how you got into this kind of accidentally.
Well, I guess as far as who I am in the business, I'm considered an old news dog. I'm a retired journalist. My background when I was in high school, it all started. I was fortunate enough to go to work after school during the summers at the local weekly newspaper. And I always thought, even before that, gee, journalism, newspaper, that would be exciting.
Yeah.
So, and those were the days, of hot lead and linotypes, and they were good to me. They taught me writing, they taught me photography. You did everything, and you cleaned the presses too. So from there, I went to UW Milwaukee. That's University of Wisconsin Milwaukee.
So you grew up? Did you grow up in Wisconsin?
Yeah, this was in northern Wisconsin. The world famous Eagle River snowmobile race. Well, that was in Eagle River.
Oh, okay.
So then I went to Milwaukee, and while I was in college, I was fortunate enough because of my high school experience to get a job with a newspaper in Milwaukee. And the same thing, it was writing and photography and, going out and covering stories and police, the whole thing. I decided I wanted to get into electronic media and was fortunate enough to get a job at a little bitty, and I mean little bitty radio station in South Texas, about as far south in Texas as you can go without getting into Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And a little town called Raymondville, right at the end of the King Ranch.
Okay.
And did everything there. I mean, did news, did a board shift, they'd do promotions where, they'd put you in jail and they'd, bail the guy out of jail thing. And I did sports broadcasting, just whatever had to be done, So I cut my teeth on radio in South Texas. From there, went to Louisiana, which is where I am now. But I moved around a lot after that. Went to Louisiana for a radio station in Alexandria, became, quote, their news department, one-man news department. And they'd never had a newsman before, a full-time newsman. And it was great. I loved it. They just turned me loose. We went out and covered stories. We created, documentaries, and it was a fabulous job. After almost 3 years, the world of TV beckoned, and I thought, I have to try it. Was fortunate again to get a good job, TV station, the NBC station in Shreveport, good market. And actually, those were the days of the Huntley-Brinkley report, and we were color. Ooh, remember the peacock and the whole bit.
Yeah, I remember the peacock.
And so we did, and I did half of it. We did a two-man newscast, the 6 o'clock news like Huntley-Brinkley. And this really, I guess, was my first go-round with Coca-Cola when I think about it. I was a short guy, still am. The guy that I was co-anchoring with was a tall guy. And we did the newscast. You may have thought we were sitting down, but we were standing up behind a desk. So it would come news time, and the crew would go get 2 Coca-Cola cases
for me
to stand on. So that was, I guess, my first. That must have been a little omen of what was to come.
Oh, that's funny.
So I did my time in Shreveport, loved it, but northern Wisconsin sort of started calling me because I got fascinated with the snowmobile business that was taking off. I thought, what an interesting sport. So I was lucky enough to get a job with the NBC station in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, Green Bay in those years, that was Vince Lombardi years. And, we could talk for an hour about Vince Lombardi, and we won't. But what a great time to be in Green Bay. So I went to Green Bay. I was in TV there for about 3 years. Had the opportunity and turned it down to go with NBC in Chicago because I just didn't want to live in Chicago,
Yeah.
And did that, and then finally went off on my own. Had my own little publication and got involved in the snowmobile industry and so forth. But writing, journalism, freelance has always been part of my background and still is today. Right now, besides the Coca-Cola books, I'm working on another book.
I love how you went from industry to industry, within that realm of journalism. And it just goes to show, I tell people, even if you're an employee, you are still an entrepreneur because your career is your business.
That's
and you
right.
showed that through seeing opportunities, seeing new things happening and jumping on it, going after it.
Well, and I'm so thankful for those years and those experiences because I learned so many facets of media,
Yeah.
which I rely on today. I do some media work for a couple of clients, and it's that experience that coming up through, don't turn down an opportunity. Learn by it. If they tell you to go clean the presses, clean the presses. You might learn something while you're doing it.
Yeah.
I did, how does this press work? What is this hot lead thing? So and I can relate to that now with the new technology and in newspapers and printing. And I look back at what we did, and I'm like, boy, this has come a long way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, I was born in 1961, so I remember having black and white TV. And then I remember our first color TV. And speaking of the Peacock, every Sunday evening,
Right.
Wonderful World of Disney. And it always showed the Peacock first. And another thing we watched on Sundays was Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Yeah.
But I'm going totally off track. But it's funny how commercial things, companies, it's funny how they're such a big part of your life, a part of your memories. And that's the Coca-Cola thing. I think that's part of the reason that it really touches so many people, because Coca-Cola is just such a big part of our life.
Well, Coca-Cola and the media, I mean, we just went through Christmas.
Mhm.
Coca-Cola saved Charlie Brown's Christmas.
Uh-huh.
The sponsors they thought this is the dumbest idea. These little cartoon characters in Christmas, they just wouldn't come forward. Coca-Cola said it's a lovely idea. And they came up with the money, sponsored it, and Charlie Brown's Christmas happened because of Coca-Cola.
Wow, that's really cool. I was watching it's like a 30-minute documentary kind of movie the other night. I think it was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about a real life cowboy, and he trains horses for movies and everything. And he trains the horses for Budweiser. He trained them to kick the football and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I had always assumed that was just like, CGI or something.
Yeah, just creative.
That was really cool. I'm getting off topic though. Okay, so tell us how you got into the Coca-Cola thing.
Well, I was doing some freelance writing, and I thought, here's an opportunity to do a travel feature. There are 2 Coca-Cola museums, which are the first 2 chapters of my first book. One is in Vicksburg, Mississippi, which is, in fact, where they first bottled Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. So I went there, and the other one is in Monroe, Louisiana. And I thought, well, those are 2 relatively close. You could do both museums in one day. And then both have interesting stories to tell about the start of Coca-Cola. Great feature. So I set off to do this travel feature. Went to Vicksburg, went to the restored old soda fountain store, got all the history, met some people. Then I went to Monroe. Well, it so happens the Monroe Museum, this is Monroe, Louisiana, mm-hmm. is a tribute to the people in Vicksburg, the Biedenharn family that started the bottling.
Oh,
So I was lucky enough to meet one of the descendants of the Biedenharns, who also is still bottling Coca-Cola. He has two plants.
wow.
And we talked and, well, what are you up to? And I explained. He said, it's more than us. It's all over. You know, there are families and there are stories yet to be told of how Coca-Cola got started. And every time somebody writes about Coca-Cola, they write about Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Nobody has written about, the guys out here in the trenches, the guys that started bottling it, the little entrepreneurs all over the country. So why don't you do? He said, "I'll help you. I'll tell you where these people are. I'll introduce you. They're good friends, you know." And I took the challenge and I loved it because it took me on so many adventures down the Coca-Cola Trail. Now we have a name for it. We're going down the trail,
Yeah.
and it was great. It's been a
It
wonderful
is
experience.
fascinating. It's fascinating to me. And as you know, most of my audience are entrepreneurs, not all, but most of them are. And I want to tell y'all, you really have to read these books, both volumes, Coca-Cola Trail, People and Places, and then More People and Places, because the entire book is full of all these entrepreneurial stories. Because when we think of Coca-Cola, or I should say when I do, and I think most people are like me, we think of the corporation, we think of the company, we think of the actual product. And what I never thought of is that all these companies, well, and you correct me, I was saying all these companies grew up around it, but actually the companies that I thought grew up around it, the bottlers and all that, they actually basically forced Coca-Cola to be the product that it is because they talked the creator into actually letting them bottle and things like
Right.
that, right?
Right. And, Coca-Cola, when old Joe Biedenharn in Vicksburg started bottling in 1895, 96, Coca-Cola thought, oh, go ahead, Joe, but they weren't at all interested in it.
Mhm.
And it was like 5 years later that these two entrepreneurs from Chattanooga went to Atlanta, Georgia, and talked to Asa Candler, who at that time owned and was producing the Coca-Cola syrup.
Uh-huh.
And they went down there, and it took them 2 trips to convince Asa that bottling was a good idea, and he didn't think it was a good idea. I think he just wanted to get rid of them. And they went down there and they said, "We want the exclusive rights to bottle Coca-Cola throughout the United States." And he used terms like it's a back alley business bottling. He said, "I'm afraid the product won't have the same quality," and he gave him all the reasons why not. Finally, I think they wore him down. He just wanted to get rid of them, and he said, "All right, go back to the hotel, draw up a contract, bring it here the next morning. We'll take a look at it." So they did, and of course they're lawyers. They knew how to draw up a contract, and they went back, and Asa Candler looked at it, and he said, "All right." He said, "I'll sell you the rights for all of the United States except Mississippi," because he knew old Joe was doing it in Mississippi.
Mhm.
And he sold the rights, exclusive rights. Now, boy, to be an entrepreneur, huh? He sold the exclusive rights for Coca-Cola bottling for $1. And it said he never collected a dollar.
That is just mind blowing, isn't it?
And what
You know, he was sitting there thinking, this is the stupidest thing in the world.
that's what he
I
said.
just want to get rid of these guys.
He told them when they left, he said, "If this doesn't work, don't come whining back to me about it." So this is how it started. They go back to Chattanooga. Between the two of them, they got $1,500.
Uh-huh.
Now, how in the world are they going to bottle Coca-Cola for the entire country with $1,500?
Yeah.
They start a little bottling plant, and they realize this is really a futile effort here. And the light goes on. I think today entrepreneurs call it franchising.
Mhm.
And they said, wait a minute, we've got the rights. let's start selling territory.
Selling the rights. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you wanted, to bottle Coca-Cola in Paducah, Kentucky, they'd sell you a 50-mile territory for X amount of money.
Okay.
But the little proviso in there, when you bought the territory, you had to use, obviously, Coca-Cola syrup to make your Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you would order your Coca-Cola syrup from Atlanta, Georgia, because that's where they made it. But every time you ordered Coca-Cola syrup, the guys in Chattanooga who sold you the territory, they got a commission on the sale of the syrup. So, I mean, they were just, they knew how to make some money out of this thing, and they did. Both of them became very wealthy.
Yeah.
In fact, what happened, as entrepreneurs will realize, sometimes a partnership doesn't exactly go the way you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
And there came a point when they decided, let's split the country in half. So the one partner, he took the southern part, and he went to Atlanta, Georgia, and he actually created the first Coca-Cola bottling plant in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh.
It wasn't owned by Coca-Cola corporate. It was owned by Mr. Whitehead, who was half partners in this business,
Mm-hmm.
and he started the Dixie Coca-Cola Bottling Company. His story is fascinating because he needed money to continue with this. And he went to a gentleman in Chattanooga and sold half of his half. He sold a quarter of his business to a Mr. Lupton.
Mm.
Well, it so happens that Mr. Lupton, his family had been in the patent medicine business, the old bottling it up type thing. So he knew a little bit about the business. He stayed in Chattanooga and would sell territories while Mr. Whitehead was back in Atlanta. And what Mr. Lupton would do, he would make sure that a lot of times he would sell to friends or people he knew were really quality people, but maybe didn't have the money totally to buy the franchise. So he'd grubstake them. He'd say, I'll tell you what, it's a $1,500 franchise. I'll put in half, but I get half of the company. So we acquired half or pieces of companies, Coca-Cola bottling companies. And this went on for generations. Well,
Wow.
by the third generation of Luptons, they were one of the largest Coca-Cola bottling operations in the country. And at that point, Coca-Cola had decided, that bottling was probably a pretty lucrative business. And Coca-Cola, besides getting into it on their own, started buying some of the franchises that were out there.
Wow.
They ultimately bought the territories, the franchises that the Lupton family had accumulated. And this is the numbers, Mr. Entrepreneur. They bought the whole works from the third generation of Luptons for $1.3 billion.
Oh my gosh.
And it all started because he bought half of $1,500 and knew what to do with his half. He was nowhere going to be in the bottling business. He was going to be in the franchise business.
When do you remember about when they bought it? About when Coca-Cola bought it from their family?
Well, yeah, that was in the 80s.
Okay.
So
yeah, that 1 point whatever billion. Now, 40 years later, that's why I was
imagine. Well, and the Luptons have that family, and I don't know everything, but I know what I've heard, and they've invested and contributed much to Chattanooga. A lot of things that have happened there are, in fact, they say Chattanooga, if you go to Chattanooga, they say it's the town made on Coca-Cola money, because there's so much that happened there, not just the Coca-Cola bottling and the franchising, but all of a sudden, what else? You have to have the wooden cases.
Yeah.
So that evolved there. The Cavalier Company, which was the number one company in creating the machines, the vending machines, that happened in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
And there's so much that came out of Chattanooga. They ultimately had a plant there that made the Coca-Cola bottle. And the story is told. In fact, one of the descendants told me this story that the salesman from the bottling plant and the salesman from the company that made the wooden cartons, the cases, they would go on sales calls together. So the Coca-Cola bottler in Keokuk or wherever, when he ordered bottles, he needed to have cases to put them in too. So it was a double sale,
Yeah.
And there was a lot of business that went to Chattanooga, and there's a lot of history, a lot of Coca-Cola history in Chattanooga. But there's a lot of Coca-Cola history all over the country.
Yeah, there's a bottler in the town over next to us, about 30 miles away. I don't even know if it's still in operation. I don't pay attention, but I remember growing up seeing it. But I just always assumed that they were owned by the company. I didn't know that,
Well,
and in this book, so there's just so many lessons in the book itself. So the first guy in Vicksburg, he was getting the other soda that he was selling, he was getting it bottled by another company, right?
right. He wasn't even all he was doing for Coca-Cola then was serving it over his fountain in his
Uh-huh.
candy store. He had the syrup. See, he not only had the syrup for his store, but
Yeah.
old Joe was a pretty good promoter. He was also a distributor. So he would buy the syrup in lots of jars of syrup and sell them to other soda fountains
Mhm.
throughout the area. So he was, as far as selling the syrup, I mean, Joe got into Coca-Cola right away. He knew that it was a good product, and had a lot more value and a lot more appeal to people than the old average soda, orange soda, lemon soda, whatever.
Yeah. Tell him about the 4th of July thing, why he got into bottling.
Well, that's really what started the whole thing. Of course, he had his soda fountain and his candy business, and he would cater. He would go off and cater to picnics and things like that, and bring, whatever. Well, there was a little bottler in Vicksburg that bottled, the other stuff, the lemons and limes and oranges and sarsaparilla, whatever. And Joe needed this for a picnic, a very large picnic that he was catering. He needed to acquire cases of mixed soda.
Uh-huh.
Well, it so happened that that was 4th of July, and the little bottler in Vicksburg couldn't fulfill the order.
Mhm.
So what does Joe do? I got to do something here. He goes to the picnic and makes lemonade for everybody. He's out there making lemonade. And he said after that picnic, this will never happen again.
Mhm.
He went to St. Louis and bought secondhand bottling equipment. And, bottling equipment, and there's a picture in the book. It's foot powered and one bottle at a time, and you carbonate it, and the carbonation comes out of a tank, and and be careful that you don't put too much in and blow the bottle up. So that's what motivated him to get into the business of bottling. And once he got into it, he said, "Wait a minute, we can get this stuff out to the country. People in the country." It was 1896. You didn't just run into town and get a bottle of Coke.
Yeah.
He thought, I can get it to the people in the country, and he was bottling it. They had special containers made where you're close to the Mississippi River there, and he would take orders, have the bottles filled in a special metal like shipping container, and take them down to the boats. And the boats would take them down the Mississippi River to whoever needed Coca-Cola. So that's how it all got started. And Coca-Cola in Atlanta just thought, but you know what? Coca-Cola in Atlanta finally got smart. And they went through a change in ownership. It was called the syndicate that bought it, and
Mhm.
there was a group of men, And they said, wait a minute, these bottlers are making a lot of money. We're going to take over that business.
Uh-huh.
And they actually, and there was a court battle over this. They said, your franchises, your licenses to bottle, these are not forever. We're going to take these back. And the bottler said, oh, no, you're not. And there was a long legal battle, and the bottlers won.
Okay.
So then Coca-Cola decided, well, we're going to buy some. So they started buying Coca-Cola bottlers, little plants that maybe, was second generation and they didn't want to do it anymore, or
Yeah.
whatever, just wanted to get out of the business. So Coke started buying them. Well, Coca-Cola realized after they'd done this for a while and buying people like Mr. Lupton in Chattanooga, that the real key to Coca-Cola's success was in that community being involved.
Yeah.
There's no other beverage that was ever involved or ever will be like Coca-Cola is in your community. Coca-Cola corporate realized at some point, no, this is recent. This has started like in the 90s. They started getting territory back. Bottlers and existing bottlers at that time, there weren't that many, got larger territories.
Okay.
And the Coca-Cola found this was a much better Coca-Cola still bottles and they still have plants and they do it, but your largest independent bottler is in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte.
And the second largest is in Birmingham.
Okay.
Alabama. And actually, the Birmingham plant, the whole operation at Coca-Cola United started as a result of the little plant in Chattanooga. And it just grew from there. I know United well because it's my area. They have 7 states, and they serve 7 states with about 4 or 5 bottling operations. There's not a bottler in every little town anymore. And the reason why, next time you're on the highway and one of those Coca-Cola semis goes flying by you, it's a lot less expensive to bottle in one place, one large place, and haul product than it is to have a bottling plant every 50 miles away. And that's what's happened to Coca-Cola. And again, it's, third generations, fourth generations, the kids are like, I don't want to do this, and we've got all this money. Let's sell this thing. So it's consolidated, but it's been a good consolidation. The Coca-Cola has kept the tradition and has done so much more with what they've got.
Well, and you're so right about them being in the communities, being so active in the communities. I imagine everybody can remember like high school sports and stuff. It was always Coca-Cola on the scoreboards. They gave the scoreboards. It would always be Coca-Cola, and that it was everywhere. And my father owned a I'm sorry, hold on. I have something trying to update on me. My father owned a small music and appliance store, and he had one of those vending machines from Cavalier, the ones that were like an ice chest, and they had the metal bars that the small bottles were hanging on, and you put your dime in and you'd slide the bottle to the end. And my sisters and I loved it because first of all, it was just so cool. And secondly, half the time the drinks would be like slushy, like icy. And oh my gosh, we just loved it. So every time we went down there, we were like, can we have 10 cents? And just so many memories like that. And people don't realize the big part that companies and even small businesses play in people's lives growing up and how they're ingrained in their memories.
Yeah, when I just started doing the book, I'd run into people and they'd say, what are you doing? I'd say, and they'd tell me a memory. And one of the most common memories is watching the Coca-Cola being bottled. Remember, all the plants always had a big window in front of it. And you'd go down there and you'd watch them bottle that Coca-Cola. And probably somebody on the bottling line would see you there and bring out a couple bottles for you, that memory, is so common, but so many other memories that people have of Coca-Cola. It's amazing, and they would tell them to you. They'd say, "Well, I remember this or whatever." It really made it. It's why today, that people, communities spend
Mhm.
thousands and thousands of dollars to restore a piece of advertising.
Uh-huh.
A Coca-Cola mural on the side of a building is a memory. And they don't want that to go away. They will have community fundraisers. The state of Michigan actually contributed half of a $50,000 project to restore a mural in Albion, Michigan over the Kalamazoo River.
Wow.
And you ask people why? Because it's memories. It's good
Mhm.
memories. It's not something bad that happened in their life. It's great memories. It's Charlie Brown's Christmas. It's whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
We just went through Christmas. Look at the trucks, the big Coca-Cola trucks that are all decorated up that come into your town with
Mhm.
who knows what they're going to be doing. But that started because of media. There was an advertising agency that created an ad, and the trucks weren't even real. They were ad created Coca-Cola trucks. It was Christmas and they were coming to town. Well, people love that so much that Coca-Cola said, let's do that. Let's have
Yeah.
every year, let's have the big Coca-Cola trucks. And I've done interviews in other countries, England in particular, and it is a big deal in England. I mean, the newspapers have the schedule when the truck is going to be in town, and
How
it's
funny.
amazing. Uh, and the international flavor. I did an interview in Dubai
Ah.
with a radio station in Dubai, and he emailed me. He said, "Yeah, will you do this?" And I said, "Well, sure, but why?" He said, "We have the biggest station in Dubai, and everybody over here loves Coca-Cola."
Mhm.
Unbelievable, just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. So,
Well,
and it's just so funny that all this adventure and these books came out, it all kind of happened accidentally because you were going to do this feature article and then pitch it to some magazines or newspapers or whatever, right?
right, and I've learned so much. The book is two things. It's a travel guide
Yeah.
and it's history.
Yes.
So, and I've had people email me and say, I'm planning part of my summer trip around your book. And what do you know about where can I stay in? We're going
Mhm.
to Chattanooga or whatever it is. And so it's a travel guide. When they get there, I've deliberately selected places where there's Coca-Cola memorabilia, buildings, signs, whatever, that you can go up, touch, and feel and be part of.
Yeah.
If you go to, for example, Paducah, Kentucky, I love that plant in Paducah. It's beautiful and it's been preserved, and it is now. There's a pizza place in there. There's a bookstore. There's um, a novelty store. I mean, it's great. And you go up there, and there'll be cars from all over the country that are parked outside going in to look at that plant. And that's what I've tried to do with the book. If
Mhm.
I find a Coca-Cola plant that is full of that now is full of accountants or lawyers, I'm not going to tell you about it because I'm
Yeah.
not going to let you in anyhow.
Yeah, exactly.
But where can you go? There's some of them are entertainment centers, music, whatever. There's some of them have been made into little boutique malls. That's the kind of stuff we were looking for. And while
Mhm.
you're there, we're going to tell you what it was before. It's
I love it. But you got to throw my third thing in. So history, travel, and entrepreneur. You got to throw that in now. Because
absolutely.
I mean, I'm not
Well,
kidding. This is a great thing for any entrepreneur to read because you're looking at people back in the late 1800s and the things that they were doing. And it was so cutting edge. Nobody else was doing it. And they're taking these risks. And the
and
one guy, was it the guy in Vicksburg? Um, Coca-Cola owed him $500 in commissions, and they offered him a share of stock for each $100, but he's like, no, I need the money.
Right.
And,
But it
and
would have been,
said,
he would have owned 1% of Coca-Cola.
yeah. And in 1990, it was that would have been valued at over $300 million. But like, all of us entrepreneurs, we like, I've got to get cash. I got to keep my business going. But that's an example of thinking about balancing out short term and long term.
Well, and we've talked about all the easy stuff, but it wasn't easy always for the bottlers.
Yeah.
I mean, here we had an unproven product.
Right.
And I think a good example in my second book, I write about Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay.
And the old country song, I was country when it wasn't cool. I was putting peanuts in my Coke,
Yes.
Well,
We used to do that.
so did I.
Yeah.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. When that bottler started out, he made his first case of Coca-Cola, and he took it to his favorite little grocery store, and he said, I'm going to leave this here with you, and I'll be back in a week to pick up the money. Well, he went back in a week, and they were using the case of Coca-Cola as a doorstop. He said, I got to do something about this. And he said, wait a minute. Got to get people to try it.
Yeah.
Make them thirsty. So he bought a big bag, like a 50-pound bag, whatever, of salted peanuts in a shell. And he got the kids to make little bitty bags, right? And then he would take his little bags of peanuts, salted peanuts, and load his truck up with Coca-Cola in the bottles, and he would go to the local football game, and he'd sell peanuts. Bags of peanuts, okay? And he figured for every bag of peanuts he would sell, he would end up selling 2 bottles of Coca-Cola. And for years afterwards, that bottler in Santa Fe did that just because it was like tradition to do it. He didn't need to anymore, but it became a thing. They looked for him at the football games or wherever. Where's the Coke man and where's the peanuts?
What a cool story, though. Figuring out a way to get people to try your product so that then they will learn that they like it. Figuring out a way to create demand and to kind of not force, but encourage, put people in a position that they really kind of have to try it. That's really cool. I haven't read that part yet.
There were so many of the bottlers that they were bottling the other stuff too. The lemons and oranges and that stuff, and they would, if they got the Coca-Cola franchise, and they were in an area that nobody heard of Coca-Cola. When a retailer would order a case of beverage, of sodas, it was supposed to be a mixed case, they'd slip a couple bottles of Coca-Cola in there. The guy didn't order them, but they put them in there. And so people had to try it. And that was one of the key things that the bottlers did initially, was to put it in with other sodas and to get people to try it, So and they tried all kinds of things. And one of the other things about Coca-Cola, we talk about the memories. Look at the Coca-Cola collectors.
Yeah.
It is the most collected brand in the world. If it's got the Coca-Cola logo on it, and the Coca-Cola logo is on, I think, everything, somebody's collecting it. And the Coca-Cola collectors are huge. They are all over, not only the United States, but in other countries. They have little meetings where they get together and they swap and sell. They have a national convention. The last one was in July in Baton Rouge. I got to go, and it's just amazing. Show me another product where people will collect there are some, it doesn't happen, but not to the extent of Coca-Cola. The trays, it just goes on and on. You walk through this exhibit hall, and it's amazing what they collect. And the bottles, I got to tell you a bottle story.
Okay.
Collecting Coca-Cola bottles is a whole different aspect of collecting. And you remember the bottles used to have on the bottom where the Coke was bottled. Well, if it came from a small plant, then that bottle is more rare.
Yeah.
There are people that specialize in the value of the Coca-Cola bottles. You could buy a directory that'll tell you, well, if the bottle is such and such and it comes from such and such. But the real secret, the Coca-Cola bottle that we know was created in 1905 after Coca-Cola said, we want our bottle. There's too much confusion in the marketplace. So they challenged the bottle makers to create the Coca-Cola bottle.
Uh-huh.
5 bottle makers made prototype models. They brought them to a judging of Coca-Cola bottlers in Atlanta, and one bottle was selected. It happened to be the one that we all familiar with, and it was made by a company in Terre Haute, Indiana. That's another chapter in the book. But anyhow, that after that judging, Coca-Cola said to all the bottle companies that were there, the bottles that were not selected must be destroyed. And as far as the one that was selected, each company brought 6.
Okay.
They were to destroy all but one, which went to the Coca-Cola archives.
Wow.
Well, guess what? One escaped. And 2 years ago, that bottle showed up at an estate auction in California, and it went for over $150,000.
Wow.
Now, how do we know it was the bottle? Because on the bottom of the bottle, it said 1905. Coca-Cola didn't start using that bottle until 1906.
Wow.
And you and I used to take them back for 2 cents, right?
Yes, yeah. We'd go pick them up by the road and go in and,
Right.
get the money so we could buy candy. And I had totally forgotten about it until I read in the book about, the betting where you said the people would get the bottles out of the machine and see whose bottle came from the furthest away. I had
Right.
totally forgotten about that.
Another memory, I got the bottle from Keokuk or whatever. So again, I don't think any other company has ever had that sort of response.
No.
And if you had the bottle that was the furthest away, you bought the next round. I mean, it's Coca-Cola. What a neat company, what a neat brand.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. The bottle that was selected, did I read in the book that the shape of it was based on the coca seed pod?
Yeah, it was. The guy that designed it, he was challenged, what should we do? And so he said, well, it's got to represent something. Well, the coca is part of the formula, So he designed it, and the original bottle that he designed had a bigger bulge in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And the bottling equipment was having a hard time with that. So they had to slim the bottle, put it on a diet, I guess, slim the bottle down. And then it became what we're all familiar with now. And of course, the bottling business went through so many changes. Now, that bottle was green, right? It had a light green tint.
Yes, yeah.
It was green by happenstance. The company in Terre Haute, Indiana, that was making it, made the first bottle, had a sand quarry about 50 miles away in a town called Greencastle, which has nothing to do with the bottle being green, but it happened to be Greencastle. Well, that sand from that quarry had certain minerals in it, I guess copper being the most dominant one. So when the glass was made with that sand, it had that green hue to it.
Okay.
Coca-Cola loved that. In fact, they gave it a name. First, they called it German green, and they thought, no, we're going to call it Georgia green. So it was Georgia green. When other bottling companies, were licensed to make the bottle, Coca-Cola said, if the sand you're working with does not have the mineral, you must add whatever it takes to create that green. So for years and years and years, the Coca-Cola bottle had green because that's the way it came out of the sand in Indiana.
That's amazing. I just always assumed, well, I don't know anything about glass in the first place, but I always just assumed, it was some kind of stain or dye in it or whatever to make it green. That is really cool.
Yeah, it is, and again, it's one of those Coca-Cola stories.
Yeah.
The fun thing of the book was learning the stories and talking to the people. For example, the Root Glass Company, which made that particular bottle, the winning bottle. I mean, the Root family went on to become not only manufacturing a bottle, but they eventually got into the bottling business, Coca-Cola bottling business, and became one of the largest Coca-Cola bottlers in the country. They even had a couple offshore bottlers in the Caribbean, in the islands. If you go to Daytona Beach, Florida, and go to the museum there is a whole wing in that museum that honors the Root family
Oh,
and there's Coca-Cola memorabilia. They they were into IndyCar. Well, heck, they were from Indiana. For years, they had championship cars racing at Indianapolis. For those of you who are Indianapolis fans, the cars were the Sumar, Sumar, Sumar race cars, and they did real well. Well, if you go to the museum, there's some Sumar race cars there.
now, why is the museum in Daytona? Why is that family in that museum in Daytona?
Okay. Another interesting story. Um, the family was living in Terre Haute, and by now we're into the third generation. Chapman Root was the owner of the bottle company when it all started. Well, his son, who would have been next in line, was killed in an airplane accident. So then we had Chapman Jr., and he was living in Terre Haute. His house burned down. Okay. And he said, there's better places, warmer places to live than Terre Haute, Indiana. Excuse me, Terre Haute, because I like it. You're a nice town. But anyhow, so he moved to Orlando, Florida. Not
okay.
to Daytona Beach, actually Ormond Beach.
Ormond, yeah.
And they established there and had their Coca-Cola business. They were setting up bottling lines, and they still, the generations of that family, it's Preston Root now, is Chapman Jr.'s grandson.
Oh, okay.
And he has been very active in auto racing. He was very gracious to me in doing the book. We spent a lot of time talking, and of course, I like IndyCar racing too, so we had that in common. But it's just it's all over the place.
Yeah.
You go to Daytona. If you don't go to that museum, I think it's called the Museum of Science and Arts or Arts, something like that. Anyhow, you can't miss it. It's the big museum in Daytona, and see all of the Coca-Cola memorabilia. It shows you as an entrepreneur where this can take you. And
Yeah. I need to go check that out. And we lived in Florida for a long time, and I knew that there was a lot of Coca-Cola money, like in Ocala and places like that, but I wasn't sure about that family. And one of my clients is actually a NASCAR driver. So next time I'm down at Daytona for a race, I need to go check that out.
Well, if he's a NASCAR driver, for several years, not in the most recent years, but Preston Root would do commentary on the radio network for the NASCAR races.
I knew I recognized that name. Okay.
I'm sure he will. And if he's at all familiar with Indy racing, the Root name in IndyCar racing is, they were there for 6 years, and they had some pretty famous drivers. It just, it's amazing how Coca-Cola spins off, and and things happen in communities all over because of it.
And look at this adventure that you've had, Larry. Would you have ever thought at this stage of your life that you would be doing something? I don't mean that disparagingly, but a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm 50, I'm old, I'm 60, I'm old, whatever. And it's like, you're living this really cool adventure. You're meeting all these people, you're traveling all over, something about a topic that you probably never really, thought that much about before.
No, I wasn't a Coca-holic. I occasionally would have a Coke, but it just, the story grabbed me, and I've met so many friends. I mean, people today that I would contact by email or whatever, and I still do write for the Coca-Cola Collectors Magazine. And
Nice.
I do it for free just because I think it's cool. I think it's neat what they're doing, and they've bought so many of my books. I just like to write for them. So I'll find a story. I did a story on the Coca-Cola bottle. We talked about the bottle that was made out of ice.
Oh,
This
I hadn't heard about that.
this happened in the country of Colombia. Okay,
Mhm.
and Coca-Cola did it as a promotion. They created a Coca-Cola bottle, the old regular shaped bottle, totally made of ice, and it was filled with Coca-Cola, and it was a promotion, but it was very popular. Got a lot of press, and I don't know for how long they did it, but they did it for I think of one summer, on the beach
Yeah.
out there, and I always thought, I know why they did it because Seven Up had done a thing in I think it was Bolivia. I'm not sure of the country, but it was an ice vending machine. And as
Mhm.
the ice, they put it in the middle of the town, and as the ice melted, a can of 7 Up became available to you.
Oh, okay.
So, Coca-Cola, not to be outdone, so wait a minute. We're going to put this thing in an ice bottle, and it got all kinds of press. People loved it, and it was a good drink. It just I felt sorry for the bottle collectors because there was nothing left.
Yeah, and I was wondering, well, how would you hold the bottle
What
without
they
your hand
what they
free?
did, Coke thought of that too. They put a little band around it. It
Okay.
only could serve as a little wristband if you wanted.
Mhm.
It was like a rubber, some sort of vinyl. So you held it with that, and then you had
Their marketing is amazing.
unbelievable, unbelievable.
Something else that I may have known this, but if I did, I forgot that the guy who created it initially did it to help himself get off of morphine. He
Well,
was addicted to morphine.
yeah, I don't know what he was, if he was into morphine or what he was, but John Pemberton, it was a Civil War. Um,
Mhm.
had been injured in the Civil War, and seriously injured, and he
Yeah.
was in major pain. And he actually invented the syrup, as they say, for medicinal purposes.
Mhm.
He was a pharmacist, and he was in Columbus, Georgia.
Uh-huh.
It was actually invented. The syrup was invented in Columbus, Georgia. Now, both Columbus and Atlanta will take claim to being the birthplace. Well, what
Mhm.
happened is he moved from Columbus to Atlanta and
Okay.
continued to perfect the syrup.
Mhm.
And once he got, and it was working, it was relieving his pain. And it's the first place he took it, where else but to a drugstore,
Mhm.
because it was, for medicinal purposes.
Yeah.
And had no idea it would become the most popular beverage in the world.
Isn't that interesting that somebody to solve their own problem created this thing, this concoction that ended up being so wonderful for a totally different use. I mean, you're still drinking it, but in a totally different use. And that's really, that's common in the entrepreneurial space. But I knew that a pharmacist had developed it, but I didn't realize that it was, to help get him get off out of a morphine addiction.
Yeah, well, I'd heard that too, and I know he was suffering from pain, and I think he was. I don't know if it was morphine or what, but it
Yeah.
was make whatever he was taking was really hindering his ability to do anything.
Yeah.
And he said,
Well, I have had you for almost an hour, Larry. I know that you and I could talk all night. I can already tell that.
"Yeah,
So
we're
I'm
doing."
going to have you on again to talk about the second book because I haven't even gotten there. But I want to ask you: is there some really interesting story or something that really surprised you that we haven't gotten to talk about yet?
I think what surprised me is just the attitude of people, the entrepreneurs, the attitude that this is a great thing. If you read the foreword in my first book, and it's
Yeah.
written by that great grandson of Joe Biedenhardt, he sums it up. He said, we are so fortunate, and I'm paraphrasing, but in essence, what he said is, if you got a license to bottle Coca-Cola, it's like a license to a gold mine.
Yeah.
You know, and they all feel that way. I mean, they're warm people. I met no one in doing this, whether by phone or in person, that was not a pleasure to work with and would open files to you, would bring in things, would say, well, what about, do you know about this? And they were just so gracious.
Yeah.
No wonder the company's a success. They have
For sure. And
they have
I did
wonderful
read that
people.
forward. I'm kind of weird. I always read forwards. A lot of people just flip past, but in order to understand the book you're going to read, a lot of times you do need to read the forward. And so I had read that, and it definitely set the stage for me looking at it from an entrepreneurial angle. But literally from your very first page, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's telling the entrepreneurial story. So look, y'all, audience, please go get the book, The Coca-Cola Trail, People and Places in the History of Coca-Cola. And then there's the second one, More People and Places.
Yep,
Um,
and
I've read the
and
first one. What?
you go to the website and get both books. Everybody's got a deal, right?
Yeah.
We give them a special price for 2 books.
Awesome.
The
And you
Coca-
also have other products on there as well, I noticed.
yeah, just mostly fun stuff,
Yeah.
But the main thing is the books.
So tell them your website address.
Simple. The CocaColaTrail.com, and
Yep.
don't hyphenate Coca-Cola. Just
Okay.
spell it out.
Yeah. So go to thecocacolatrail.com and order the books, y'all. You are going to learn so much accidentally from Larry just starting to write this feature article. So I thank you so much for writing it, Larry, and for sending me the books. I've just had a ball reading them. And as I told you earlier, my sister was like, where'd you get that? So now I know what I'm getting them for their birthday this year.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I've enjoyed talking with you, and you're as enthusiastic about the product and the history as I am. So thank you so
I
much.
definitely am. And this in your story and the stories in the book are both perfect for my theme, Disrupt Your Now, because I'm all about making things happen. What can you do to disrupt things, to do something different? So the whole thing, your own story, as well as the stories in the book, are just a perfect fit for this. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa. We've enjoyed it.
Okay, speak with you soon. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody, and I will see y'all next Tuesday. Bye.